to do a quick demo of ChainForge. ChainForge is a project I've been working on for maybe a month and a half now. It is a data flow environment for prompt engineering. It's focused on the evaluation of prompts. So what can ChainForge be useful for? So I'm going to create a new evaluation chain here in order to demonstrate how Chainflow works. So say we're building a writing tool that needs to shorten a paragraph of text while keeping meaning and readability. So we want to find a good, reliable prompt that does this for us, that shortens a paragraph. And ordinarily what we would do is we would go to ChatGPT and we would sort of explore a bunch of things, but that is very ad hoc and isn't very systematic. And it also takes a lot of time, right? So suppose I had this writing task and I had some ideas about, okay, maybe I have some ideas about some example prompts I could give it. So first we're going to construct our overall prompt, which is something like we have a prefix, right? And then after the prefix, we have the paragraph, right? Okay. So as you see here, there's this prefix and paragraph inputs which have appeared. For the prefix, this is really the kind of prompts that I'm trying to test, and the paragraph is sort of the example data that I'm giving it that I want it to shorten. So for the prefix, I might, think some good prompts are shorten the following paragraph while keeping readability. Okay, so we have 3 prompts here that we're going to try out. And then here, I'm going to fill this in with a bunch of paragraphs, which I have pre-collected. So now we're going to link up the prefix to our prefix input here and the paragraphs to our paragraph input. And we also want to consider this line here, number of responses per prompt. Now, of course, it's going to cost us more, a lot more, if we make this number large, right? But usually it's good to put in a couple more responses than just one in order to get some better sense of the kinds of prompts, kinds of responses you're going to get, because otherwise you could have just sort of one-off mistakes and then you could go away from prompts which might actually be useful. Also, I should say, this large language model part here is actually going to be a separate node in the near future. So right now its temperature is set at all default settings for these APIs, but definitely want to let people change the temperature in the future. Okay, so now I have my prefix and my paragraph set up and I have my prompt template. Let's run this. Okay, so we've got our responses back. As you see here, there's actually a preview window of the responses, which we get back. The paragraph and prefix variables in our prompt template appear here, just a very, very quick preview to give you an understanding of the context. And then here's a very brief preview of the response here. So as we can already see, despite their reputation as dangerous, glancing at this, it seems like it's reworded this part of the paragraph, which we may or may not want. And if we want to inspect more of the responses, we can just link it up to an inspect node, and then we can inspect individual responses. We get like a very, very long list, and this is really just so you can access them. In the future, I'm going to make this sort of inspection tools much better. So now we want to understand very quickly, because there's a lot of responses, how well did each response reduce the input paragraph? And in order to do that, we can write what's called an evaluator node. You can write whatever Python function you want, including an import statement if you wanted to do that, right? And import JSON, and like if your output was JSON, then you can sort of determine that by writing this, writing a Python function evaluate. And so here what I've done is I've written a function which returns the length of the response, because that seems to be what we care about here. And so if I run this, it's going to evaluate all the responses according to this. So all it's doing here is it's going through every single response and it's just outputting the size of it. And if we want to visualize this, which I'll do in a second, we connect it to a visualization node. However, key here is that we don't actually care about the paragraphs, right? The paragraphs are some variability which helps us understand the how good the prompt is, but we don't care about visualizing differences between paragraphs. And since we don't care about that, we can just type in here that we're going to reduce, we're going to average across all paragraphs in the input. So if we run this again, now we've averaged across all of those paragraphs. And if we connect this up to a visualization node, we get a very nice visualization instantaneously of our different prompts here. So as we can see, and I'm going to push this closer so we can see this more directly. So as we can see here, these text field nodes include our prefixes, and these are our prefixes over here. Remove unnecessary words seems to be the longest. Delete words seems to shorten the responses sort of a middling amount. And then shorten appears on the left here and seems to shorten it perhaps the most. But it seems like there's just some outliers here where it's, as we can see by scrolling over it, where it just sort of keeps 1 to 2 sentences. And then if we go up here, then maybe it does a better job, let's say 70% of the time, right? And what's really nice about this is we can see the variability in addition to the individual responses, and we might choose a particular prompt because it's less variable, it's more robust. We have more expected outputs than something like this, where sometimes it just deletes almost all of the sentences. Now, that's all well and good, but here you might say, well, yes, the length of response is interesting and the variability is interesting, but isn't this confounded by the length of the paragraphs, right? And so you might say, well, how much shorter is this, is a particular response compared to the input paragraph? So in order to figure that out, we can actually do that. We can do response.var paragraph. So each response has access to a variable of what it was input with. And so now I can get the length of the paragraph variable and then subtract here the length of the response text. And so now we see how much shorter it is. And if we run this, now we get a probably more accurate table of just how much shortening there has been. And in order to sort of help explain this to people, we could actually rename this node. And let me see, we could rename it to how many characters were removed, right? To make it very clear what this is showing. So higher here might be better depending on what you're looking for. So now as we see remove unnecessary words sort of removed the least amount of text, including in some cases almost no text as we see here. So yeah, so this is a sort of way of exploring prompts very, very quickly in a way which is more than just reading individual lines of text. And I hope in the future to support other evaluator nodes and splitter nodes and other node types in order to make the prompt engineering task a lot quicker, and so that people don't have to write their sort of custom Python functions in order to do this. However, I will say right now it's very powerful in order to just write these custom Python functions because we sometimes don't know what kinds of evaluations we want to perform. And so this gives you the maximum in flexibility. So this is just a ChainForge demo, and hopefully I'm going to release this as a demo version pretty soon.